I'm Rabbi Dan Selsberg of Beth Jacob Synagogue in Hamilton, Ontario. This is Mitzvah Tube, and this is the Dvar Torah for the first day of Rosh Hashanah, 5773, 2012. It's called Active Anniversary. A standard complaint is that kids today are overprogrammed. We're as guilty as the next family of not giving our kids the kind of free time that earlier generations enjoyed. But I have to confess, it's not that easy. It's not just that we want to give them every opportunity. It's also that whenever our 8-year-old boys have any free time, be it on a lazy summer's day or in a few hours between school and bedtime, they have the same refrain. There's nothing to do. Whenever they're faced with unstructured time, they say there's nothing to do. I was the same way. And if during the high holidays we're supposed to confess our shortcomings, I have one shortcoming that comes up every year. I have a hard time changing their behavior, though I know exactly what the problem is. Every time they make the whiny complaint, my response is to list the things that they can do. Like other middle-class families, we have a Chinese factory's worth of toys and games and books in our home. And so I list them, tell them all that they have to do, and nothing changes. And we descend into the boys wrestling, parents yelling, and we move farther away from the mitzvah of shalom bayit, of having a peaceful home. So what's my problem? When faced with the question, I passively tell them what to do. The passivity of my response influences the passivity of their response. No, the only thing that changes the tone for the better, when I stop doing the dishes or working or whatever it is, and I actively get up and show them what fun can be had. If I play catch with them, or run around the block with them, or do the puzzle with them, if I actively seek to change the situation, they will respond, and everyone's experience is transformed. We are transformed. Me into one of those good playing catch dads, and not one of those yelling remote cats in the cradle dads. And it changes them from complaining lumps to laughing active kids. But somehow, too often, I find it hard to break out of the passive cycle, and I have a hard time recognizing what the situation is, even as I'm going through it. In retrospect, I can pick it out, but in the moment, it's harder. That must be part of the reason we have a calendar that asks us to pause, to remember, and to think about where we are, how we got here, and where we want to be. It reminds me of that often told story of the amiable old fish who's swimming down the stream and encounters a pair of younger fish. The older fish greets them, says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" The younger fish return his good morning, and they swim on. A little ways down the river, one fish looks quizzically at the other and says, "What the hell's water?" Awareness of where we are and how we got here is hard for a fish, but it's essential for Jews. Which brings us to being aware of who we are as a community, how we got here, and where we want to be. How do we get here? Jews found their way to Hamilton in the 1830s. They got around to setting up a burial society, which they called Anshe Shalom, in 1853. They got a charter for religious services in 1863. And by 1881, the Jewish population numbered about 2,500. Not in Hamilton, but in all of Canada. 2,500 people. Many of the Jewish immigrants in the middle of the 1800s to North America were from Germanic Central Europe, and their reform leanings didn't mesh with the more orthodox practices of the wave of immigration that began in 1880 from Eastern Europe. That led to disagreements, and when the more traditional arrivals to Hamilton couldn't find common ground with their Reform brothers and sisters, they didn't just complain, They didn't just tell others what to do. They cared enough to take the active approach, and they started a new shul. They started our shul 125 years ago this fall. At the time of Beth Jacob's birth, there was an estimated 20 Jewish families in all of Hamilton. And I know that sometimes it feels like there's still only about 20 Jewish families in all of Hamilton, but in fact we've grown. And it's well worth thinking about the level of dedication and love of Jewish life that it took for the founders of this shul. Life in 1887 couldn't have been terribly easy to begin with, much less so for new immigrants to Canada, much less so for people so dedicated that they're willing to double down on their distinctive ethnic and religious identity long before multiculturalism entered the lexicon. It couldn't have been any easier in 1887 to be Jewish than it is today, yet they cared enough to build this place. We're not just in their debt for the institution we inherited or the inspiration that their dedication provides, but they acted not only for themselves, but so others, present and future, could benefit from the furthering of the ideals and commitments that flow from Torah. That mission, begun 125 years ago, remains for us to fulfill. And you know what they broke away from Anshe Shalom over? The records show Beth Jacob wanted to celebrate the second day of Rosh Hashanah, and Anshe Shalom, following their full practice of the day, said no. So that was the final straw. Apparently, no one back then had yet figured out, but more than a few of you have figured out, if you don't want to come to second day of Rosh Hashanah, don't show up. But Chacham, no one hit upon that solution, and 20 families had 2 shuls. But I like the story anyway, because I like the attitudes of the participants. Because those pioneers, those early Jewish residents of Hamilton, stood up and actively did something to build a community. They knew that life here was not like life there. That while in Europe, one might be able to count on the normal order of society to provide a properly Jewish atmosphere, here, one has to actively make Jewish life happen. Left wing or right wing matters less to me than the fact that they refused to be passive. When faced with a vacuum, they built the community they felt was needed to properly practice their faith, to preserve the sacred traditions of Israel, to give themselves and others a chance not just to live in a new land, but to live lives while benefiting from, to live meaningful lives while benefiting from what building on to the deeply textured structure of Jewish life could do. Britain's chief rabbi, Lord Jonathan Sacks, illustrates this point nicely. Rabbi Sacks recounts the Torah's description of Moses' ascent up Mount Sinai. Moses goes up the mountain as commanded. He stays 40 days, 40 nights. God gives him the tablets. And on the tablets, it says in Exodus 32, were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God, engraved on the tablets. And Moses carries them down the mountain and sees the Israelites at the foot of the mountain, worshiping the golden calf. Midrash says they were breaking all 10 commandments at the same time while doing it. You can imagine that for yourselves. Moses sees this going on, and he smashes the tablets. And why? Why does he destroy God's work? He was upset. Doesn't quite work as an excuse. We all get upset, but we don't all end up breaking objects of supernatural value. But Moses apparently wasn't that attached to what God had made and given him. They were a gift from God, and Moses was only the passive receiver. So if the tablets got smashed, why do we have a picture in synagogue after synagogue above the Ark of the 10 Commandments? Of course, Moses smashes the tablets, punishes the perpetrators, goes back up the mountain. He prays God for forgiveness for the people, and God grants his request and asks Moses to make a second set of tablets. Exodus 34 says, Adonai says to Moses, Psal lecha shnei luchot avanim karishonim, v'katavti ala luchot et hadavrim asher ayu ala luchot harishonim asher shebarta. Carve 2 tablets of the stone, like the first, God says. I will write on the tablets the words which were on the first tablets which you broke. What's the difference here? The first tablets were God's work. The second tablets are a partnership. Moses carves the tablets, God writes. God made one set and gave them to Moses, and they didn't last. The second set was a joint project, and it's the second set which we have as a representation of in art and synagogues everywhere. Rabbi Sachs puts it nicely. Despite their greater sanctity, the first tablets did not last. Wholly divine, they were too sacred to be fully integrated into the life of human beings. The second tablets were the result of a partnership between Moses and God, and they did survive. But the second set of tablets did not merely survive, they changed things. Moses came down from the mountain with the second set of tablets, and his face had such a radiance that people were afraid to look at him. Moses wasn't even aware of the change, but his face glowed. Of course, rendered as horn, homonym in the Hebrew, rather than radiant. This is why Michelangelo and more than a few of your acquaintances think Jews have horns. But, to the point, notice how the first tablets gave Moses a less than ideal reaction, one of anger and destruction, and the second gave him incredible joy. Why? Because he worked on them. Again, Rabbi Sachs. Moses himself was changed as a result of his participation. His face shone. After the first tablets, where he was merely the passive recipient of God's gift, he was still the same Moses. After the second, he was different. We are changed, not by what we receive, but by what we do. And this is the core of what we need to know when we look back at 125 years of this holy congregation, and what we must know for the years to come. Passive Judaism, merely laying back to receive the tablets, will not lead to a community of lasting worth. It is only through active participation in building a community that we will build something that will last. This is our charge. We do not face hardships that our ancestors did. We do not face, but we face a future that requires our active efforts to create. We have accomplished much. From our modest beginnings, Beth Jacob has been an active presence in the lives of thousands of Jews for 125 years, and with your and my active participation, we will continue for many, many more. Not because we unthinkingly keep swimming forward like the fish in the joke, but because we know all too well we can't go with the flow. We need to be aware of where we are, how we got here, and where we can go. Not because we treat the Jewish tradition as a museum pieces to be perfectly preserved or ignored, but because we are committed to combining Jewish tradition with the openness and dynamism of Western society, and that takes effort. Being a good Jew takes effort. Being a mensch takes effort. And we're here to help. Rosh Hashanah is Yom HaDin. It's a day of judgment, when we are to admit our faults and commit to being better people. It's not a simple task. It takes honesty, and it takes admitting that in years past, we have failed to reach our full potential. So this year, in addition to the personal commitments you are making silently or confiding to someone close, I want you to add one more commitment. Add a mitzvah to your life that will help contribute to our 125th year. Something you're not already doing. Help us. Help beautify the grounds of the building. Help plan a dinner or an event. Learn a Haftarah. Help organize the library. Learn how to lead a service. Help organize the archives. Help reorganize the kitchen. Show up to Minyan at least once a month and commit to it. Not just an internal promise to yourself, but a real promise to someone else. To this end, on Rosh Hashanah, we're going to have sheets outside with different commitments that you can make, and pick it up and email the email address on it. And we'll build a stronger synagogue over the course of the year by using all of our talents. Add your own idea to the list if you want to. This way, we'll build a shul worthy of our venerable age. Membership in the synagogue is not just about sending in your check, though that's greatly appreciated and hugely necessary, but it's about building a sacred space where uniquely in our world, everyone is valued as being created in the divine image. We are all capable of contributing, and when we contribute, we make something more meaningful than any of us could alone. When people act in concert in a way that tries to create a more godly world, as Rabbi Sachs teaches, it is, in the words of the Kabbalah, an awakening from below. An awakening from above changes nature, he says, but does not change human nature. An awakening from below is a human gesture of reaching up towards heaven. When that happens, the horizons of human possibility are enlarged because we are what we do. Moses passively took the awakening from above, the first set of tablets, and smashed them. But when he actively participated in the creation of the second set, he was a man transformed. Sachs takes it even further. The implication is simple, he says, passive dependence on God inhibits religious maturity. We are asked to be active partners. You can be passive in any level of religiosity or active in any level. What is asked is that you participate and give Jewish life the stamp that only you can give it. We're incomplete without you. Now, I'm still working on being the good, active parent, on being the model for active, engaged, filling life that I hope for my children. I try as much as I can not to be among the fish in the sea, who may or may not know that the water's fine. Like you, I'm blessed to be here, in a community that so many have worked so hard to build. 125 years is not insignificant for the life of a Jewish community. May we be blessed with many more, and individually and together, may we be inscribed in the book of life, and may we actively ensure that for this community, and for Jews the world over, a more peaceful and more joyous and more fulfilling chapters in Jewish history are still to come. Shna Tova Tikatevu. May it be inscribed in the book of life, blessings and peace.